There is a kind of love that we are not taught to guard against. A kind of love that does not come in the form of scolding or physical wounds, but rather slowly and silently suffocates the soul. It comes from those we call family, those who should be our safest place, but inadvertently become the first chains that hold us back from what we are no longer. From a young age, you are taught that family comes first, that no matter what anyone does to you, if they are family, you must forgive, you must be patient, you must endure, because love is greater than anything. You must not talk back to your parents, you must not do anything to upset them. You must be the child they are proud of. But no one asks what the price of being that ideal child is. You start denying yourself. You stay silent when you feel hurt because you're afraid of disappointing them. You choose the career they want because you don't want to cause trouble. You hide your true self, your true interests, your true desires, just to keep family dinners from becoming tense. And you tell yourself, they do it because they love me. But is that really love, or just a sugar-coated form of control? Carl Jung once said that the path to true selfhood is the most painful because it requires us to look at the most uncomfortable things, even when that means confronting our loved ones. Jung doesn't teach us to rebel. He doesn't tell us to cut ties. But he does force us to see clearly, because only when we see the truth can we have a chance to live a life free of the same old wounds. Imagine a man named Michael. He grew up in a typical family. His parents were both hard-working, always emphasizing the value of responsibility and sacrifice. But behind that idealistic facade, Michael never had the chance to ask the question, what do I really want? Whenever he mentioned pursuing art, his mother would fall silent, her eyes filled with silent disappointment, a wordless verdict. Do you think painting can support you? Only when you become a parent do you understand your parents' feelings. These familiar, repetitive phrases were enough to make him put his dream back in the drawer. Michael is not alone. There are millions of people living like that. Each day going to work is a day of self-denial. They do not resent, do not struggle, simply endure silently and tell themselves, family is everything. But when love forces you to live against yourself, it is no longer love. It is fear disguised as morality. Jung understood this. He called it the family shadow, the place where expectations, unhealed wounds, and illusions are passed down through the generations. We think we love each other, but sometimes we unconsciously bind others because we don't dare face our own fears. The mother who forbids her daughter from loving someone outside her culture because she herself was abandoned. The father who forbids his son from pursuing his artistic dreams because he himself was ridiculed for doing the same. They don't do it out of malice. But the pain that isn't healed continues to hurt. And you, the child, the grandchild, the younger sibling, if you are not alert, will become the next person in that repeating chain. The problem is, because they are your loved ones, it is easy to forgive them, and hard to forgive yourself if you have upset them. You feel guilty. You feel selfish. But really, you just want to be real. You were not created to be someone else's unfulfilled dream. You are not here to keep the peace in your home by silencing your inner voice. You are not to blame for wanting to be different. But until you see that, you will continue to give in, continue to shrink, and continue to compromise the most precious thing in your life, your inner truth. This video isn't meant to make you hate anyone. It's meant to make you start to see things clearly. Not everyone who loves you knows how to love healthily. Not everyone who gave birth to you is mature enough not to hurt you. And not everyone who is close to you is the person who should be with you until the end. If these words make you uncomfortable, don't turn away. Stay. It may be a sign that something inside you is crying out for release. Maybe you've been silent for too long, and now it's time to look back. Not with rebellion, but with dignity. If you've ever felt guilty for simply wanting to be yourself, stay with this video until the end. It may be the first time you hear a truth that everyone avoids, that you don't have to sacrifice yourself to prove your filial piety, and that love, if it's real, will never demand it. Love, when it is true, is something that is given without asking for anything in return. But in many families, love is tied with conditions. It is no longer free and open, but becomes a system of hidden exchanges. Good children are loved, obedient children are praised, children who sacrifice are recognized. Everything good comes with a faint but oppressive if, and from there, a mechanism of emotional manipulation is gradually established, not out of malice, but out of nameless hurts, unexplained fears. Imagine a child named Alex. From a young age, Alex was the pride of his family, good at studying, polite, and well-behaved. Whenever he met expectations, he was praised, hugged, and even shown off to his relatives. But if he deviated from that model even slightly, when he didn't get a good grade, when he disobeyed his mother, when he chose something different from his family, all eyes immediately turned. No scolding, just a cold look, a heavy silence, a casual. That's disappointing. Alex began to learn not to hurt anyone, even if it meant giving up on himself. Conditional love works insidiously like that. It is not overt violence. It is a subtle chain reaction that makes you adjust yourself little by little. Not because you want to, but because you are afraid of losing the love you once thought was unconditional. Carl Jung called this phenomenon psychic possession, when your consciousness and behavior are controlled by the unresolved emotions of others. In families, this happens more often than we think. A mother who was betrayed in the past becomes controlling of her daughter by instilling in her a fear of men. A father who was denied his musical dreams constantly sabotages his son's artistic efforts just because he doesn't want him to stumble like him. These things don't always come from hatred. Instead, they are wrapped up in the names of worry, love, care. When you live in that environment long enough, you start to doubt yourself. Every time you want to do something different, you ask yourself, am I doing something wrong? Will this upset Mom? Am I a bad daughter? The real question you're avoiding is, am I worthy of love if I'm not what they expect me to be? Emotional manipulation starts with small signals. A seemingly innocuous statement like, if you loved us, you wouldn't go that far. Or, have you thought about our feelings? When repeated long enough, these statements become a deep belief in your mind that love means giving up on yourself. The catch is that conditional love doesn't make you hate your loved ones. On the contrary, the more you love them, the more you fall into a state of self-denial in order to be accepted. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want to be called selfish. And so you shrink back. You become a version of yourself that pleases others, but is completely alien to yourself. You stay silent when criticized. You reluctantly choose a career that is arranged. You don't dare to share your true feelings because you know they will never accept. Every decision you make is accompanied by a fear. Will I disappoint someone? And then, you yourself start to believe, this is normal, this is love, this is responsibility. But no, Jung would tell you, love should never be used as a weapon. Love should never be used as a tool to control another person. True love does not demand absolute obedience, nor does it require people to sacrifice themselves just to maintain harmony. When someone makes you feel guilty just because you want to be true to yourself, that is not love. That is control disguised as love. Back to Alex. Years later, Alex is now an adult. On the outside, he appears successful, stable, the pride of his family. But in his quiet moments, Alex feels empty. A sadness that he doesn't know why. A feeling that he's living someone else's life, not his own. Because in truth, Alex never really chose his life. Every decision is weighed against a single criterion: how to not disappoint his family. Emotional manipulation is not always malicious. It can come from people who truly love you, but have never learned to love without control. They love you through their fears, through wounds they have never healed, and they unconsciously transfer that burden onto you. And you, if you are not conscious, will continue to carry it for the rest of your life, or until you dare to ask, is this love? Jung is not saying you have to abandon your family. He is not advocating severance or rebellion. What he is asking is awareness. When you recognize the manipulation that is taking place, you have the opportunity to break it. Not by revenge, but by ceasing to support it. You don't have to hate anyone, but you do have to stop letting others define your worth just because they gave birth to you. You are allowed to say, I love you, but I need to live my own life. You are allowed to set boundaries without feeling guilty. You can love someone and still reject the unhealthy behaviors they are repeating toward you. You were not born to be someone else's emotional keeper. No one has the right to impose their emotional burden on you, even if they love you. And you don't have to prove your worth by sacrificing all your dreams, all your interests, all your differences just to be considered a good child. Emotional manipulation only continues to exist when you don't recognize it. When you start questioning, start discerning, start looking straight, you've taken a big step toward breaking it. Because true love is unconditional. And if someone only loves you when you are exactly the way they want you to be, then they don't really love you. They're only loving the image of you they imagine. But you're not an image. You're a person. You're a unique individual, worthy of being loved, not because you're perfect, but because you are you. If this hurts, that's okay, because pain isn't making you weak, it's making you real. And the truth, however, lonely is always the beginning of freedom. Not all wounds are visible on the outside. Some are deep inside, formed through gentle but powerful words. Why can't you be like everyone else? Who would accept the way you dress? Don't embarrass us. These are not harsh words, but they are like small, sharp knives, cutting into the self that is forming inside you. And before you know who you are, you have learned to become a version that others find more palatable. In psychology, Carl Jung called the process of becoming yourself individuation, the journey to find your true self, away from stereotypes, expectations, and imposed definitions. This is not a journey of rebellion or breaking all the mold. This is the bravest journey a person can take, because it requires you to face the loneliness of being different. And sadly, the biggest obstacle on that journey often comes from the people closest to you. You can probably recall a time in your life when you first showed off something different. Maybe you talked about a crazy idea, shared a dream that was different from everyone else, or simply chose an outfit that expressed your individuality. But instead of being listened to, you were laughed at. Instead of being encouraged, you were shut down. And you began to learn to hide the things that made you different. Imagine a girl named Emma. From a young age, Emma always felt different from the people around her. She loved poetry, liked silence, was sensitive to subtleties. But in her family, strength and practical success were highly valued. Whenever Emma cried, she was scolded for being weak. Whenever she talked about her deep thoughts, her parents said, "Don't think too much." She wasn't beaten. She wasn't scolded harshly. But little by little, Emma realized that she was not welcome in the place that should have been her home. That rejection wasn't always obvious. It was in the silent stare, the cold back, the feeling that you were a stranger in your own family. And because she wanted to be loved, Emma began to change. She learned to be tough, to pretend to be okay, to get good grades, to choose a major with a future. But the more she lived like that, the more she felt like she was living in an empty shell. She smiled when she needed to, said what people wanted to hear, but deep down, she knew she was losing herself. The pain of being rejected for being yourself can leave a scar that lasts longer than any scolding, because it makes you believe that the real you isn't good enough, that if you express yourself, you'll be rejected. And that fear becomes an invisible lock, keeping you in the false comfort zone of being like everyone else. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest privilege in life is to be yourself, but that privilege is not given. It must be earned, and the price to pay is sometimes distance, misunderstanding, and reproachful looks from those who once loved you conditionally." The value system in many families is built on consensus and conformity. This creates a sense of stability on the surface, but it also stifles diversity. Each individual is born with a unique soul, a unique path. But when you are crammed into a set of pre-existing patterns, how to behave, how to live, who to love, what to pursue, you begin to live someone else's life. Jung believed that the shadow of the family is not just a recurring negative, but also an unacknowledged self. Every time you hide your emotions, every time you deny a part of yourself to avoid being judged, you are feeding the shadow. And the danger is, the shadow does not go away. It just goes into hiding. And one day, It will return in the form of a crisis, a depression, or a wordless emptiness. Denial of the true self is also a form of rootlessness. You no longer remember what you liked, what you dreamed of, what you felt excited about. You live your life in a routine. Study, work, get married, have children, live correctly. But every night, when everything is quiet, you hear a small voice inside you say, "This is not me." The catch is, people who ask you to deny yourself don't think they're doing anything wrong. They think they're protecting you. They think that being different means being wrong. But here's the thing. If you're constantly having to trim yourself to fit the comfort of others, you're slowly erasing yourself. Conformity can be comfortable, but the truth is often inconvenient. And to be authentic, you have to be comfortable with that discomfort. You have to be okay with not pleasing everyone. You have to be brave enough to stop playing a role, even one you've played for years. The first step in the journey to reclaiming your identity is to ask yourself, who am I doing this for? Am I living this way because I choose to, or because I am afraid? What part of my true self has been rejected, extinguished, or made to feel wrong? When you start having an honest conversation with yourself, you will see that the part of you that you have forgotten is not weak. It is just waiting to be accepted, and you do not need anyone's permission to be yourself. The truth is, some people may not like you anymore. They may feel that you have changed, but you have to ask yourself, am I living to be accepted or to be alive? Emma, after years of hiding herself, finally chose to leave the city where she was born. She pursued art, living a simple but fulfilling life. Her family didn't understand. Her old friends thought she was weird. But for the first time in her life, Emma felt free, no longer living in the tight clothes of expectation, no longer asking for permission to be herself. You can do the same. You can refuse roles you never chose. You can say no to the definitions of right and wrong that others have assigned to you. And most of all, you can choose to be true to who you are, even at the cost of the disapproval of those who once called it love. Because no one can live a full life if they are constantly denying who they really are. And if love requires you to give up yourself, then maybe it is time to ask yourself again, is that really love? There are criticisms that don't come across as angry, nor are they spoken in an angry tone. They come disguised as concern and are delivered as seemingly sincere advice. I'm just saying that because I'm worried about you. I don't want you to fall like I did. I just want the best for you. But if you pay close attention, you'll see that these words often don't make you feel supported. Instead, they make you doubt yourself, make you withdraw, make you feel like you're never good enough. It is the most subtle form of criticism. Criticism disguised as love. And the thing is, it is not uncommon. In many families, criticism has become the main language of communication, and it is passed down from generation to generation as a matter of course. I was told that when I was a child, and it didn't matter. My parents used to say it even harsher. These statements make one thing clear. The hurt that is not healed will recur, and it is not through malice, but through habit. Carl Jung called this unconscious part the shadow. It is the part of the psyche that people do not want to face. Fear, inferiority complex, jealousy, failure, unfulfilled dreams. When not recognized and healed, the shadow does not disappear. It only changes shape. And one of its most common shapes is criticism of others. The mother who dreamed of becoming a singer but was forced to give it up will later laugh at her daughter when she holds the microphone. Who can listen to your singing? The father who was laughed at for being weak will call his son daughter whenever he cries. The aunt who has never been acknowledged by anyone will direct cruelty at her nephew just because he is loved by everyone. These words do not come from a healthy place. They are reactions of the shadow, of the parts of ourselves that have not been accepted, now seeking to escape by judging and belittling others. The problem is, the recipients of these comments usually, children don't know it. A child doesn't have the ability to differentiate between valid criticism and attacks based on someone else's pain. That child grows up feeling like there's something wrong with him. He thinks his sensitivity is the problem, that his dreams are stupid, that he's somehow inadequate. And then he starts to believe that voice. Not the outside voice, but the inner voice that's been shaped by 100 times of being taught. Every time he steps out of his comfort zone, that voice says, "Who do you think you are to do that?" Jung believed that one of the greatest barriers to personal growth is the identification of your outer voice with your inner voice. When you listen to someone criticizing you long enough, you lose the ability to distinguish between objective judgment and a reflection of their pain. And you continue to live in their shadow, not because they want you to, but because you don't know that you can live differently. The danger is, criticism in disguise doesn't come once. It comes back and forth, drip by drip. And the tragedy is, many people carry those voices with them throughout their lives. Even after the speaker is gone, even after you've left the house, the voice follows you as a reminder that you should never take risks. You become the saboteur of your own dreams. No one tells you you can't do it. You convince yourself that it's safer that way. But the truth is, you weren't born to live in someone else's shadow. And you certainly don't deserve to carry someone else's unhealed pain. Their shadow is not your responsibility. You can love them, but that doesn't mean you have to believe in the limits they set for you. Learn to tell the difference. When someone says, "I just want the best for my child," but what they say makes you feel small, humiliated, or scared, they are probably speaking from their own pain, not from love. When someone says, "I'm serious, don't be upset," but their words are always demeaning, they are probably trying to keep you in the same place they were, not because you're inadequate, but because your light makes them feel lost. And if you are someone who tends to criticize others, maybe it is time to take a look. What part of you is not being heard? Have you been hurt by someone with words? Are you trying to save someone from pain, or are you unconsciously repeating that pain? Looking at your shadow is not easy, but it is the only way to avoid using it as a weapon to hurt others. Carl Jung didn't study psychology just to understand other people. He studied so that people could understand themselves. Because only when you understand yourself can you escape the cycle. And only when you recognize the voice of true love and the echo of your shadow can you begin to live a life that is no longer guided by the fear and hurt of others. You are not inferior. You are not worthless. And you do not have to live up to the standards of those who have failed at their own lives. Their shadow is not your destiny. You can step out of it. You can choose to be kind to yourself. And if someone truly loves you, they will learn to love the real you that emerges in your light. There is a bond that no one can see. It makes no sound, leaves no bruises, but it can keep you still for life. It is guilt, an emotion so persistent and so deep that it can make you give up on yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. And the scary thing is, in many families, guilt is more than just an emotion. It becomes a tool, an invisible string used to control, to keep you there, to keep you from leaving even though your heart has wanted to for a long time. If you've ever heard the phrase, "After all we've done for you, this is how you treat us," you've probably experienced it. A moment when you lose sight of what's right and what's wrong. You feel like you're the one at fault. Even if your actions were completely normal, like moving out, falling in love with the person you chose, or simply not calling home on time. But because someone tells you that you're hurting them, you immediately back off. You apologize. You keep quiet. You agree to do things you don't want to do, just to dispel the gnawing guilt inside. Carl Jung once said that guilt is not necessarily a sign that you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it just means that you are breaking an old belief, a pattern that the other person has become accustomed to. Guilt tripping works best in close relationships, where people know exactly where your weaknesses are. And in many cases, no one does it on purpose. They believe they are being honest about their feelings. They really do feel pain. But instead of taking responsibility for those feelings, they put the burden on you. Imagine a man named Daniel. He is the eldest son in a family of farming parents. Since childhood, Daniel was taught that his success would be the family's greatest pride. He studied hard, studied abroad, and got a good job in a big city. But every time he returned home, he heard things like, "You are so good, why don't you stay close to your parents instead of going far away?" Or, "In the past, Your parents sacrificed so much for you, now you live a happy life, but you just need to call home every week and you can't. Daniel remained silent, not protesting, because everything they said was right. Right in terms of facts, but wrong in terms of purpose. True love doesn't carry a check. It doesn't use the past to demand the present. If parents have sacrificed, it's a choice of love, not a hidden contract to force their children to respond in the way they want. But in Daniel's case, those reminders are no longer sharing. They are a means to keep him from living up to his own choices. Although he loves his job, he feels guilty every time he signs a new contract. Although he has a girlfriend, he hesitates to share because he fears his mother will disapprove. He lives with the feeling of betrayal. Not because he did something wrong, but because he didn't live up to others' expectations. Guilt tripping takes away your ability to make independent decisions. When you constantly have to consider, will this upset someone? You stop asking, is this right for me? And so, you start living your life with a completely skewed frame of reference. You become easily manipulated. If someone seems upset, you back off. If someone reminds you of your sacrifice, you change your mind. You call not because you want to, but because you're afraid of hurting them. You stay in relationships that are no longer right for you, just because you're afraid of being seen as ungrateful. Carl Jung emphasized that true love comes with freedom. If someone makes you feel like you can't be yourself without hurting them, then it's probably not love. It's a form of dependence. And the danger of that dependence is that it's rationalized by something very sacred: piety, morality, duty. You convince yourself that you're doing the right thing, even though deep down you know you're betraying yourself. Family love, ideally, is a place where each individual grows up with safety and acceptance. But if it becomes a space where you feel guilty for being yourself, then you need to ask yourself, is it still healthy love? This doesn't mean you have to cut it off. It doesn't mean you stop loving, but it does mean you need to set clear boundaries. You have the right to say, I understand you're upset, but this is my decision. You can love someone and still say no to things that make you feel small. You can be grateful without feeling trapped by a lifelong obligation. Maturity doesn't come from always pleasing others. It comes from listening to yourself first, and then choosing how to respond to others. And when you learn that, you'll see that guilt is no longer a shackle. It's just an emotion, and you don't have to act on it. Guilt tripping only works when you don't realize you're being manipulated. Once you see clearly, you can separate the other person's feelings from your own responsibility. You can start telling the truth, not out of anger, but out of loyalty to yourself. I love you, Mom and Dad, but I can't live my life to please anyone but myself. And if someone truly loves you, they will learn to accept that. Not right away, but they will understand children are not copies, nor are they investments to expect a return. Each person is a separate soul. And love, if it cannot accept that, is no longer love. Freedom begins with a choice, refusing to let guilt dictate your path. No one can go through life carrying the burden of others, and you don't have to do that to prove you're a good person. Being authentic is the best proof. When a child is spanked, adults say, he's too stubborn, he needs to be taught a lesson. When a child cries because he's been insulted, they say, be sensitive, you can't even stand words. End of. When someone speaks up because he's been scolded in front of others, the usual response is, that's just the way Dad is. Just a little hot-tempered. And so, emotional and verbal abuse is normalized. Swallowed. Called by more acceptable names. Discipline. Straightforwardness. Family tradition. Carl Jung once said that what we are not conscious of will continue to repeat itself in our lives as fate. The normalization of abuse is one of the most dangerous loops because it hides in the guise of affection, of culture, of niceness. It makes us believe that being insulted is a small thing, that being shouted at is normal, that emotional pain is not as serious as a slap in the face. And once we believe this, we learn to accept it. We learn to be silent. The silence is not because it doesn't hurt. It's because of the misguided belief that speaking up will make things worse. Have you ever been in that situation? A family meal where you're made fun of, but no one defends you. A time when your parents yelled at you until you cried over a small mistake, but you were told, "Oh, never mind. Your parents are just yelling at you, but they love you." A loving relationship filled with contempt, control, and ridicule, but defended with the line, "That's just what they say. No one's going to do anything to you." The danger of normalizing abuse is that it makes the victim think they're wrong because it hurts. A child who is yelled at every day doesn't think, "My parents have a problem," but wonders, "Am I really that bad?" As they grow up, they'll continue to stay in similar relationships. Not because they're weak, but because it's familiar. Jung believed that the human psyche tends to return to what's known, even when it hurts. Because for people who grew up in unsafe environments, chaos feels like home. You can see this in someone who chooses friends who tease them, in someone who falls in love with someone who is controlling, in someone who is afraid to express their needs because they were told they were overdoing it. They are not looking for abuse. They just have never known a healthy kind of love. But this repetition is not destiny. It can stop. And to stop, the first thing is to name it. This is not the right way to love. This is a violation of boundaries. This is emotional abuse. Abuse doesn't have to be physical. It can come in the form of having your needs ignored, being verbally humiliated, being controlled by subtle threats. And no, you're not too sensitive just because you feel hurt. Emotions are a guide to knowing what's safe. When you have to constantly make excuses for someone, when you always find reasons to keep someone in your life even though they drain you, that's not loving. That's continuing to stay silent in the face of normalized abuse. That silence is fertile ground for wounds to continue to grow. When no one says anything, the perpetrator believes their actions are right. The victim believes their feelings are irrational. And the next generation watches, learns, and repeats. Carl Jung emphasized that to break through the darkness, we must shine the light of awareness on it. You can't change something if you don't call it by its name. So start small. When someone says something that hurts you, don't laugh it off. When you witness abusive behavior in your family, don't say, "That's just their nature." When you hear someone use words to hurt someone and call it being blunt, ask yourself, if this happened in a work environment, would it be acceptable? Change doesn't come from anger. It comes from being honest with your feelings. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to say, "I don't accept being talked to that way." And if someone disregards your feelings, that's a reflection on them, not on you. A healthy family is not one where there is no conflict, but one where each person can speak the truth without fear of humiliation. Where feelings are heard, not ridiculed. Where differences are not punished with harsh words. You are not selfish for wanting to be treated with respect. You are not weak for refusing to accept words that hurt you. You are not ungrateful for not wanting to continue a painful tradition in the name of family. Silence is no longer a virtue when it perpetuates hurt. It's time to name what's happening. It's time to speak up, not to criticize, but to bring closure. And if you're the first person in your family to do so, you may feel alone. But remember, you're laying the groundwork for a generation that won't have to call pain normal. Not everyone leaves because they no longer love. There are people who choose distance not to take revenge, not to run away, but to breathe, to remember who they were before being assigned all kinds of roles, to return to the self that they were taught to be different, selfish, or unreasonable. Many people won't understand. They'll look at you with reproachful eyes. They'll say you've changed. They'll call your growth a betrayal. But the truth is, sometimes, being misunderstood is the price you pay for being yourself. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest privilege of man is to be himself." And that privilege doesn't come from conformity. It comes from the times you dare to choose yourself amid the noise of expectations. From the times you dare to take a step back from a loved one, not out of hate, but because love cannot continue if it keeps hurting you. Healing is not rebellion. It is resurrection. You don't have to cut off all ties, but you do have to stop allowing someone to continue to hurt you in the name of love. You can love and still set boundaries. You can be compassionate, but not allow a repeat. You can stay in a relationship, but no longer live in the old mold it once held for you. The hardest part isn't letting go. It's accepting that there may never be an apology. There may never be recognition. There may never be understanding from the person you've been waiting for. And even if it doesn't come, you have to learn to move on. Because peace isn't about how others see you. It's about whether you dare to see yourself, completely and utterly. You don't need anyone's permission to be authentic. You don't need approval to be valuable. You just need the courage to say, I see myself, I am here, and I am worthy. When you stop blaming, stop waiting for validation from others, you begin to truly come home. Not to the house you grew up in, but to the part of you that you once denied in order to be loved. To the child who was once loved conditionally, and now you are the first to say to it, you don't have to be perfect, you are still loved. This is the end of one cycle. But it is also the beginning of another, a journey where you choose yourself without guilt, a journey where you no longer define yourself based on the eyes of others. A journey where you are brave enough to know that if someone really loves you, they will learn to love you for who you are. Not a model, not a role, just you, complete, contradictory, but whole. You betray no one when you are true to yourself. The highest loyalty a human being can have is not to any other person, but to their own truth. And when you are true to that truth, you are not only freeing yourself, you are opening a new path for the next generation, a space where people can be themselves without suffering. There will be no fireworks. No one will be waiting for you with open arms. But there will be a peace that no condition can buy. A peace that does not come from pleasing anyone, but from the fact that in the end, after all, you chose yourself. You chose to come back. Not to give up on anyone, but to stop giving up on yourself.